Okay, so hope my desktop is visible to you all, and I'll just give you a small briefing about this course. Okay. Um, So this is actually a 24 hours course, which you are well aware of it. I've given a complete briefing about it on my browser. Probably you would have read through that. And so what is that we'll be learning through this 24 hours of program is basically the complete framework. Okay, the complete framework in sense, I'm talking about the Spring framework. Uh, I guess you are well aware of the prerequisite. The prerequisite for this course is mandate you need to be aware of core Java and as well as the advanced Java part. You need to be aware of both. So ensure that you have some skills on that. Otherwise, I mean, in the initial stage, probably a couple of weeks, you need to have the knowledge on core Java. Okay, and okay, just a second. Yes, people are having some trouble in the lobby. Just a second. Okay, I guess people are having some trouble. Is there any trouble you're facing? Because frequently I'm seeing people are uh, moving out of the meeting.
No, sir, bro. It's
No, sir,
recording.
I guess.
Okay, okay, got it. Just a second. Okay, I guess I have a trouble in my digital pen. Okay, let me give you a basic flow. So it all starts with Spring Core. The training is going to be started with Spring Core. Spring Core is more similar like how we talk about a Java, core Java, right? You people would have studied core Java somewhere down the lane. Uh, so being a language, yes, Java is going to be the language, but Spring Core is very specific to uh, the uh, the core essential part of the entire Spring framework. So if we take the Spring framework as whole, it has many libraries in it. Probably few people might be working on that platform. You might be aware of it, which is like Spring Core. We have Spring MVC, we have Spring JDBC, we have a Spring Security, right? We have the more enhanced part of the Spring framework today. We have a Spring Boot, and probably I have a separate course for that, which I'm planning for to come up post this session, post this training gets over. So from where we can develop more advanced applications like microservice based applications and so on. So looking at the major space for developing an enterprise application. So I'm talking about an enterprise application here. It's because Spring is exclusively used for developing more of enterprise graded application rather than just a kind of a front end style of application. Today, if you see, we have front end applications like, for example, we have Angular, which is a front end application development framework, which follows the TypeScript in it as a language. So if you take Angular, Angular has TypeScript, but that's only for the front end. You take React.js, probably you have a JavaScript in it, or could be an ECMAScript. So that is again for a front end. Similarly, for back end, Okay, backend application development, which focuses for either a web development or an enterprise graded applications. We will be using the Spring framework, and the Spring framework has an advantage of connecting with multiple other libraries and frameworks as well. So let's take an example. If I want to connect to a database, a backend, then sure, I need to have some a library which helps me to connect with the backend. I will code in order to communicate with the backend. Like for example, JDBC. So Spring offers something called Spring JDBC. JDBC is a kind of a vanilla tool for communicating with the backend when it comes to the Java application. You have Java application, you have JDBC, you have your Oracle database, or Java application, a JDBC, and you will have MySQL database. Your JDBC is an intermediate between your application and the backend. That's how we have seen so far in the ages. But today, that JDBC part is getting replaced with the help of a Spring JDBC when you sit on top of the Spring application development. So why I'm giving this as an example is Spring has a multi-variant of tools or libraries which we can essentially use in developing an enterprise graded application. Okay, so this is the overall understanding of the Spring framework. It has many features in it. So if you look at in my project, we usually work with Spring framework, but nowadays we are working on top of Spring Boot because we have multiple microservices coming into the picture. So we choose Spring Boot as an essential development tool from the Spring framework umbrella. Okay, so but in order to learn Spring Boot, we have to be much skilled on the Spring framework, the fundamental Spring framework. Only then it's good to have a learning on Spring Boot. But nowadays, people are forced to learn Spring Boot without even learning the Spring fundamental. That is from starting from the Spring Core or Spring MVC. We don't learn Spring Core and Spring MVC. Without the learning of Spring Core and Spring MVC, we directly sit on top of Spring Boot. Advisably, that is not the correct approach because all organizations might not use Spring Boot at present. Probably in the future it might be common, but still, to go to the Spring Boot, we have to have the fundamental in place. And that's what which we are going to learn throughout this course of 24 hours. And we are going to start from Spring Core as a first level of learning. Okay. We'll learn more about this Spring Core and the architecture shortly. But if in case you have any queries or questions that you want to come up with, probably you can throw. Anyways, we will have an exclusive query session at the end. The last 30 minutes will be for a query session. You can also make a note of all your queries. Okay, if in case you don't want to interrupt in between the session, you can well and good. You can make a note of the queries, and let's try to have a kind of brainstorming conversations at the end of the 30 minutes. And if still that's not possible or supportable, then we will catch it up on the group. You can throw your queries there also. At the best, I'll try to respond. But if you see during the weekdays, I'll be pretty engaged with my official work. So I'll not be able to respond if in case you have any queries. But you, within a group, you can exchange your answers and queries. I always appreciate that you come forward to post your queries and then respond to the queries. The people who have knowledge on that try to respond or throw some references so that the people can catch up from there. Okay, so let's make it a little collaborative because we have a multitude of technologies are available today. So we'll try to stay in connect. I'll try to come up onto the group probably in the evening time after 8 o'clock or so, because I have workload till 7 or 8, which I start in the morning somewhere 7 o'clock. So because it's a Japan client, so they are 3 hours ahead of us from India. So probably after 8 o'clock in the evening, I'll try to respond if in case you have any queries. But try to use that group only for exchanging the knowledge. Okay, so that's something very important. You have to come up with more questions. Then only I can help you out. Okay, otherwise I'll be thinking that you are already getting the skills in place. So please do try to come up with your queries whenever and wherever possible. Hope so far things are fine. I'm audible to you all. Any challenges, please do let me know. you can, I guess you are able to access the chat, right? I guess you'll be able to access my chat. I'm sorry, the chat window.
No, sir, I couldn't able to.
Oh, okay. So is this chat not accessible? Okay. Okay. Are you able to receive my text? I've just pinged now. You are seeing on the screen. You all can confirm whether you are receiving my text on the chat, or is it the chat is completely disabled?
No, we can't.
No, sir, it's not.
It's just
Okay.
saying
Yeah.
like chat in channel meetings is only available to team members.
So chat and
Okay.
chat is
Disable the chat.
disabled in this.
Okay, okay, I got it. I got it. I have to do a bit of settings because this is the first time actually I engaged with this Microsoft product. I thought of coming up with a Google Meet, but since I'm using Microsoft Teams in Office, so I created an official account of a personal account. I'm sorry, a personal account with Microsoft. So I guess I have to do a little bit of setting changes there. Um, probably you can unmute yourself and raise a question for today, and probably by end of day, I'll try to change the settings so that you'll be having an
Sir,
access
you are
to
using the
put your chat.
Teams use through browser or app?
I'm using app.
Then please invite with that. Then everyone can easily.
Come again?
App, if you are inviting individual name means we can get directly.
Okay, no, actually, I've invited via Teams calendar only. So no, that the problem is at the time of initial time, right? So the settings which I've set in the configuration is only for the employees of the organization, because this is a Microsoft complete stack. So actually, I don't have any organization, right? So this is the first time I've created. By mistakenly, I've set it as non-guest mode. You're getting it. So guest can participate, but the settings is configured to non-guest mode. Certain features of the teams will not be accessible to them directly. I'll try to change that. I need to do some changes there. I'll do it probably by today. Okay. Just a second. Okay. Okay. So hope you are aware that this. Okay, this is the screen is a problem. Okay, just a second. Hope you would have seen the list of softwares which I've mentioned on the group. But initially, we are in need of an IDE, and right now I'm triggering with Spring Tool Suite. Probably you would have got the software in place in your systems. This is exactly an Eclipse IDE, so nothing to worry about. People who haven't worked on Eclipse, probably this is going to be a little difficult to get accustomed with it or to get used to it until you get more closer working with it. It will take some time. But I advise people, most of the people would have already working on the project, so you might be using Eclipse. But this Spring Tool Suite is exclusively for developing Spring applications. So we have all the essential uh, plugins which is integrated with the Spring Tool Suite. Is my screen visible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm saying the main desktop because I have some challenge here. I don't know. Okay, so hope you are able to see this IDE right now, which got launched.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So
Yes,
I mean, intermittently I'll be asking this kind of questions because this is not a live. I mean, this is not more of a real-time classroom session, right? So I might not be in a position to view your reaction. So try to adjust with that kind of a questions which I post it often, so that my mind gets prepared. Okay, you're aware and things are going well. So I post that question often. So sorry for that. And yeah, so this is how an Spring Tool Suite would look like. If people who are pretty new, please try to have a look at it. This is more. This is I mean 100%. It's more similar to the Eclipse. Obviously, it is an Eclipse type of version. If you see, so we have this Spring. Yeah. So here, someone is there. Saktivel Sendil Kumar. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Just a second.
Sir, that is Arna Devi from.
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah, got it. Okay, so if you look at it here, you can see it is none other than an Eclipse division of tool. Okay, so you can see a lot of Eclipse logos which are displayed here, which says that it is nothing but built on top of Eclipse. So if you're an Eclipse person, then probably this is nothing for you. And so the workspace would look like this. And I'm just going to help you out in creating a new project first. Okay, this is just a basic setup. Don't worry, I'm not directly going into the project creations or code creations. Just an initial medal up with the IDE. This is a Mac operating system. Okay, the one thing which I wanted to suggest here is the visual what you're seeing right now. The components, the screens, the menus might vary because most of you might be using Windows environment, or probably if you are used to the Mac, then this is going to be easy to follow up. But nothing much big. The menus, everything seems to be more similar, but the place where it has been put up might vary. Like for example, if you are working on Windows, if you could launch your STS, the STS means Spring Tool Suite, and you can actually look at a Windows menu there available, and you'll be having something called preference. If possible, probably not now or later on, you just look at the menu window, and here you will have something called preferences. But if you look at the Mac, right? So there, what happens is if you come to the beginning of the menu, the Spring Tool Suite 4 label, and there you will be having preferences. Okay, so this is how it differs. But apart from that, whatever menu that I'm talking about, you will find it in your Windows as well. You're getting it? So please make a note of it. The reason I'm using Mac is because I only have Mac in my home. So I have Windows, but those couple of laptops are official laptops given by my organization. So one is Techem, another one is a Nissan laptop. So obviously I am not entitled to use that laptop for my commercial purpose, personal commercial purpose. So that's why I'm using Mac right now, and that's why a little hassle that I'm facing because the sharing mode and the teams are also a little different here in the Mac. This is the first time I've installed Teams on the Mac, so that's why. Okay, so file a new Java project, there are many ways to create a project. Okay, one is you can create a standard Java project, or standard Java project means without using any tool, a kind of build tools. Let's say Maven. Okay, Maven is one of the build tool. I guess I've already posted the Maven software details, right? So Maven is a build tool which helps us to build our application pretty smoothly, and it also manages the dependency. Maven manages the dependencies. So libraries, whatever libraries that particular project requires can be managed by Maven. We do have Gradle, but I'll be demonstrating on top of Maven, because Maven is what is I have been using so far in the years. Even in the current project, we are enforced to use Maven. But yes, Gradle is also a choice, and you can think of it. If in case you want to work with Gradle, you can do that as well. As I said, it's a standard Java project we can create, or we can create the Maven-based project, or if it's a Spring Boot application, right? At that time, you can just go ahead and create Spring Starter project. Okay, I advise not to use Spring Starter project unless and until if you're not skilled on the fundamental of Spring framework. Hope you're getting it. The reason I'm saying is because Spring Starter project is actually helping you out in creating a Spring Boot project, and that's pretty simple. Okay, just like that, we can go ahead and create a Spring Boot project. And working on top of a Spring Boot is also pretty easier in the initial stages, as I'm saying. But as we go along, developing more complex applications, the complexity will be there. But Spring Boot will ease up the configuration part. Okay, so I advise not to use this Spring Starter project in your Spring Tool suite. Now, one more question you might have is, if you open a raw Eclipse IDE, you don't have STS, you only have Eclipse, or you have something like Code Ready Studio. I do have Code Ready Studio of JBoss. Okay, so you can think of having the Code Ready Studio as well. Either way, you will not find the Spring Starter project, because that's exclusively there available on your Spring Tool suite. So if in case you want to integrate this, you have to have additional plugin to be installed in your Eclipse. Okay, by that way you can do it. Anyways, that's out of the box of today's session, but I'm just giving you a gist of information on that. Spring Starter project is used to develop a Spring Boot project. Okay, so this is how it looks like. You can see it hits the start.spring.io, the starter portal. Okay, directly hits the starter portal and brings up all the essential configuration settings. And then we hit next and choose all the libraries. The Spring Boot libraries are listed out here. You can just directly go ahead and choose the libraries that you want to add them. You can select them and you can do. That's all. It's again a Maven based. Okay, the reason I'm saying it's Maven based because we choose that. Here you can see it could be a Maven type or it could be a Gradle type, right? That you can have a choice, but Spring Boot is applicable for both. Okay. So why is that? You can ask a question. Why is that you're not starting this program by just going with the Spring Boot, and you teach a Spring framework on top of the Spring Boot? Yes, of course we can do. But as I said, Spring Boot will what to say is abstract the major configurations that the developer has to do usually when they are creating a basic Spring application. So it'll eliminate all the basic configurations part. By that way, your learning curve is reduced. Okay, so that's why it's not a good choice always to go start with Spring Boot. Okay, so that is one. The second is you can go to the file menu and go to other. Sorry if people are already aware of this. I'm repeating this. Yes, of course, there are people who are new. So for them, I'm just giving this information. So please stay patient. If you go to the wizard, right, this wizard type will have an option to search for the type of application that you want to create. The one is Maven project. Okay, you can go for selecting of the Maven project and here you can hit next. And this will help you to bring up a default workspace settings, and it will help you to choose the archetype. Okay, the Maven archetype. Literally, it will be in internal. I'm not going to explain this right now because I have some challenges in the Maven on my Mac machine. But this is how a archetype would look like. Maven archetype. This Maven archetype will help us in creating a quick starter project, or it could be an web app application. So right now we will be going through the channel of quick start because it's just a core application we are going to study. Once we move to the web application learning using Spring, then we'll be choosing the archetype as web app. Okay. I'll park this aside. Right now I'm parking this aside because I'm not going to teach you on the Maven right now since I have some challenges in enabling this. Uh, this is just an introductory part of how we create a Maven application. I'll give you more in detail of this tomorrow. In tomorrow's session, we have an interesting way to create a project via Maven as well. So as I said, one is Spring Starter, another one is you can go to the other and choose a Maven project, or you can create a Java project like this. Okay, it could be a Java project, or if you don't find such menus, don't get panicked. You can all the way go down to the other, right? And you can type in the term called Java, and or yeah. So if you see here, you have I mean mostly um, the classes interfaces relevant to Java is listed out. But if you see that there's something called Java project out here, right? So this is something that you have to make a note of it. So from this wizard, you'll be able to select a Java project. If in case you're not able to find it out on the menu, you can always go ahead to the other section. It opens a wizard, it launches a wizard, and there you can search for Java and you get the Java project out there. Okay. Uh, Pretty simple, right? It's all a self-explanatory, nothing much too difficult to learn. So I go again. So since I have Java project listed in my menu, I'm choosing it. Otherwise, you go all the way down to the other and then type in Java and you will see the Java project option. It's just an option that's been thrown in the on the wizard. Okay, you can choose that. It'll take you to the same page, the one which I'm showing right now. You'll be redirected to the same page, to this typically a kind of a dialog box where you'll be feeding in your project name. So right now I'm going to feed in the project name as, let's say, e-commerce project temporarily, e-commerce. Okay, and it's your choice what version that you're going to choose, but ideally I advise you to have JDK 8 installed in your machine. Minimum is JDK 8 or JDK 11. I guess I've given JDK 11 on the group. So you can have JDK 11 or you can have JDK 16, or even the market is going to come up with 17, but that's your choice. So right now I'm going for, I think I have to go for 14. The reason is, let me show you that. So when I go to the terminal, you can just have a look onto my version that I've installed on my Mac machine. So it's nothing but the version of Java 14, right? So that's the reason that I'm saying that you have to check your version that you have in your machine, in your system, and accordingly you can come up and choose your choice of JDK version, a Java version out here. The next thing that we are going to do is just hit next. It's pretty simple. Just go to next, and I guess you don't need to do any further changes here. Let it be as it is. You can click finish. Hit next and click finish. That's all. I don't want any module name currently. You can ignore that if there is a question for creating a module. I don't want to create any module right now. So right away, we are done by creating a new Java project. This is just a standalone project, and you can see the library that's been referred here is Java SE 14. Okay, so this will include all the features of Java 8 as well, and there's only a source. Okay, there's nothing much. So from here you can create any further packages or classes or whatever you wanted. So right now, the very first thing that I'm going to create is a source folder. Okay, I'll put a pause over here. You can see that the project got created. I'm just right clicking and I'm going to create a source folder. Okay. So anyone practicing parallelly with me? Anyone trying to do, I mean, are you trying to imitate my work on your mission? Is anyone doing? Please let me know. Or you're just observing my presentation.
Yes, I'm trying to follow up you.
Okay. So how many of them? Probably, let me take a.
No, sir,
Let
I
me take.
couldn't make my environment ready. I need some time. Tomorrow I'll be ready.
Yeah, that's fine. That's not an issue. Okay, but still, I just wanted to know how many of them are following me by imitating. So, Rajalakshmi, right?
Yeah, I'm
Um,
also having some trouble in Spring Toolshoot, so I'm just fixing that. Maybe I think I will be ready by tomorrow.
Okay. So, is anyone any other people who are trying?
No, I'm just listening because I'm not having.
Okay. Okay.
This is Aruna Devi. Actually, I'm actually trying to mimic you.
Okay. Got it. Fine.
Mm,
Okay. Okay. Fine. Great. So, I mean, because it seems to be I'm moving a little fast. So if everyone are inclined, if almost 70% of the people are trying to imitate me, then probably I'll go a little slow. Okay, so that you can follow my flow of work. Probably, I guess by tomorrow everyone will be ready. The reason is, if you do, you will not sleep. You're getting it. If you don't imitate me, then obviously you'll feel sleepy because it's a 3 hours of long journey. So I advise to have some probably yes. You can. So how do you ensure that you listen to me, you watch me, and you parallelly do that? You have to think of. If you have dual monitors, you can do it, or if you have some iPad, you can just catch up my presentation on iPad, and you can work on the system. It's up to you. You try to set up accordingly. Otherwise, it's going to be just as a normal going to some MOOC portal and then watching the video. That's how it looks like. So I advise you personally that if you could set up such kind of a thing, probably if in case you can you have the uh, flexibility and the options to do it, probably you try to have dual monitors, or you try to have your phone, if you have enlarged screens of phones, better use there and try to work around here. Okay, but today I'll go with a little faster pace because
Sorry, before we start, are we recording the session?
yes, I'm recording this session. Yes, and
Okay,
the
thanks.
recordings are two modes of recording. One is a recording which is done and it will be instantly uploaded on the Microsoft OneDrive. I have invested on OneDrive. So there it will get uploaded and the link will be generated, which I'll be sharing. But that link will be available only for few days. After that, I will delete it because I have only 1 TB of OneDrive size. So I'll be deleting it and I'll be giving you an offline access of my recording, which is also happening through my Camtasia. So that version of recording will also be shared by Monday. But meanwhile, I'll try to share the link by today night from the Teams so that you can access them.
Okay, sure.
If in case, I guess it might ask for the credentials. Let me check and I'll update you. So as soon as possible, I'll try to share the offline the recordings as well. But that will take some time because I have to edit it from the Camtasia and I have to do some audio settings and things like that. So it will take some time. Okay. Now, looking at this is the reason why one more thing is see don't depend on recordings. Okay, I'm okay if you're going to continue through the entire 24 hours of program, or it's up to you. It's up to your choice. But then what I wanted to say here is you will be forced, if you're not given with the recording instantly, okay, because you will be forced to attend the sessions regularly, so that it will be more interactive and you will have the option to raise your queries then and there. Watching a video later on will not be that effective than the one that you lively attend for, right? So that's why I'm saying, but that's not the reason that I'm not sharing the recordings immediately. I don't have the option to quickly share it. So 3 hours of session recordings is a huge size, so I have to split them up and then I have to edit it and I have to share it. Okay. Yeah. So coming back, this is about the one. Uh, so the source part, it's a normal source directory that we have here on the project, and what we have to do here is, from here we have to create the package, right? So the packages are the place where we are going to drop all our source codes, the source class file, .java files, I'm sorry. So you will have this package and you create your Java classes out there. This is very simple explanations. Most of you might be aware of it, but still, I'm going to create my own package. So you have the option to create a package. Right click on the source, new package. So let's give it as com dot let's say skillup. Sorry. Okay, so let this be the base package. So right now a package got created. I'm sorry, I was about to explain this, right? So we got a little deviated. So I was about to explain this source folder, right? If it's a normal Scratch project that you create like this, okay? If it's a Maven, pretty simple, okay? Straightforward and it's pretty simple. But if it's going to be non-Maven project, a standard project that you create on an Eclipse IDE, like the one like the one which I created, it's not going to be that straightforward. So from the source, I'm trying to create one source folder, which is very much important. Make a note of it. And the source folder that I'm going to name it as resources. Okay, the folder name is going to be kept as resources directory. I'll tell you that why and when we have to use this resources directory. But at present, you can see all the source folders difference. Okay, these are packages, these are source folders, right? So you can create as many number of source folders that you want it. Now, what happens when we create a source folder like this is, if you go to the properties of this project, you can right click and go to the properties of the project. And literally, if you look at it here, you have something called Java build path. Okay, and you can see the resources is added, right? The resources directory is added straight to the e-commerce. Okay, even though it looks like I've created under the source, if you can see that. Let me minimize this. See, it's not coming under that, because either way you can do it. You can right click on the e-commerce and then you can go ahead and create a source folder. What it means is, these two are the straight project representation folders which will be recognized by any environment. So let's say if I'm going to drop in some property files in this. Okay, I'm going to create a property file. Let's say file, a normal ordinary file, and give a name called application.properties. I hope most of you knew what property files are in Java. So in Java, properties files are it's a configuration files. You drop all your configuration details onto it. It can be used for different purposes, not just about for configuring the property. Giving the configuration details. Okay, so I can just give some informations like application name, application.name equals e-commerce, right? So we have a key value pair representation. Okay, it's a key value pair representation, and by this way we are able to access this key and the value inside our code. Okay, we'll get to know about those things as we go along with the course. Now, the resources directory will be recognized by the environment where the project is going to be executed. So that's why it's a source folder. The next thing that we have to do is creating a packages. I don't have a test environment here, which we will see a bit later. So I don't have the test related source folders. Right now, I only own the package and a resources directory. From the package, you can start creating one more package. So let's say it's going to be called as main. So this is a sub package, right? Then I'm going to create one more package called let's say model, and I'm going to create another package called let's say service. Okay, so these are some of the sub packages that I've created under this com.skillup. Okay, so I guess this main is not essential always, because we can have the main class to be dropped inside the skillup itself, and that main class can follow up with all the other sub packages. But anyways, for our understanding, I've just created main directory here, or a package to say. So in this, I can go ahead and create one class, and let's name it as e-commerce main. And we have the option here to enable the public static void main. As I told you, right, this is a standalone application. So we have to have this main method in place. It's not a web application right now. Just go and hit finish. Okay. So we get the class created automatically, named as e-commerce. Okay. Is my font visible now? Means
Yes.
readable. Hope it's readable right now. Okay, great.
Yeah.
So yeah. Now this is a usual setup which you might be aware of. The next important thing that we have to do is we have to bring up the libraries, right? So we have to catch up with the libraries, and the libraries we have to download from the specific location, because it's a standard application, not a Maven application. So we have to do everything manually. It's a manual step involved. It's good to have this knowledge. Okay, people who are new learner, probably you should know about this basic steps. Okay, how do you manually go ahead and capture the dependencies, and then you load them up into the project? That's something very essential. People who are already a Java developer, this is a cakewalk for you. So you might have done this thousands of times. So you might be very much accustomed to the Maven type. So, but anyways, please do hold the patience so that we'll just look up the basics, and then later on we'll move on with the Maven. Now, coming back to this libraries, we are talking about the Spring framework, right? So we need to have Spring libraries in place. Okay, just a second. Yeah. Now, so we have this, you can just search for Spring jars Maven. Okay, so it will take you to the Maven repository. It will throw the Maven repository reference links. You can just click on Maven repository. So Maven repository is the place where all the libraries will be pushed. All Java, open source Java libraries will be pushed. I again highlight the word called open sourced libraries, not the commercial one. Okay, commercial one, you won't find it. For example, Oracle libraries. If there's any Oracle libraries like OJDBC, I guess, initially they were not having the option to post it onto the Maven because they made it commercial aspect. But the thing is, open source libraries will all be available. The very first thing you have to note from the Maven is this one. Okay, so this is how the path for accessing the libraries will be. the home of the Maven, and from there it's org.spring framework is the base, and under that there is a list of library called Spring Core. So let's go ahead and click on org.spring framework. So when you move backward, you can see list of all the libraries relevant to Spring, because the group is Spring framework. The group is Spring framework. Under that group, you have all the relevant libraries. So let's say, for example, Spring JDBC. If you want to download Spring JDBC, you go ahead and do it. Spring Beans, Spring Core, right? So essentially, if I want to develop a core Spring Core application, essentially, what are the libraries that are required? That we have to find out first. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to look out for Spring Core. Then I'm going to look out for Spring Beans. Then I'm going to look out for Spring Context. Do we have Spring Context here? I guess, yeah, we have. And we have to go for Spring Expression Language Spell. Okay, make a note of it somewhere. See, I don't have any PPTs or a kind of notes, so I advise you to make a note wherever essentially required. So we all start with this Spring Core. Okay, so Spring Core, Spring Beans, Spring Context, Spring Expression Language. Are you getting it? So just open those links, and if you scroll it down, you will see a list of versions. You can see list of versions here, right? So 5.3.7 seems to be the latest version, which got uploaded recently in the May month of 2021. Very much recent version. So version that you're going to learn probably is 5.3.7. Okay, so if you go for an interview, on which version you worked with or which version you are aware of, please be very clear about, because usually I conduct interviews. I'm a part of an interview panel. So on the weekdays and the weekends, even today, I had a interview for around 4 candidates. So I used to ask questions from these places to get to know whether the candidate is having a passion to learn the technology depth, right? This might be a pretty weird question. Why do we need to ask about the version? But still, if the candidate can able to recall or recognize the version on which he or she had worked with, then literally that shows the level of impact that candidate has on top of the technology. So it's up to your choice anyways, whether to remember or not, because if you go to the Google and type the Spring versions, it will list out. It's not a big deal, but just for in case, if you can remember, please do remember as well. So it all started from the journey of 1, and right now we are landed in 5.3.7 in the month of May 2021. If you look at the version of 1, Spring version 1, somewhere in 2005 December, right? So long back. So it's almost 15, 16 years, I guess, right? So now here, if I click on the 5.3.7 version, you will have this XML configuration, the dependencies, which we usually add it into the Spring, in the Maven configuration file called pom.xml, pom.xml, right? So you can just copy this and drop it over there, or you can directly go ahead and download the jar. You can see right now I have the jar option visible here. So you can just click on this and this will download. You keep it. And if you look down, if you scroll down, right? So there is dependencies, compiled dependencies are there. Okay. These are the dependencies which are required in terms of this usage of this jar. But right now, I guess we don't need to go to that level, because this JCL is not an essential dependency for using the jar core, Spring Core jar. Okay, so I leave it as such. If you go to the next one, the Spring Beans, right? again 5.3.7. Just click on the latest version and then download the jar again. And you keep it. Now you can notice something, that the dependency for Spring Bean is Spring Core. If you want to use Spring Bean, right, you have to have Spring Core in place. So what is the very first library that is required is Spring Core. What is the next one that I'm looking for is Spring Bean, right? So that's how it goes on. And then I even go up to the Spring context, 5.3.7. It's a time consuming. That's why we go for Maven dependency management tools. Here you can see there are a lot of dependencies are in place for the Spring Bean. Spring AOP is there, Spring Core is there, Spring Expression is there. I'll also include AOP, not an issue. Okay, so let's go ahead and download this. See how difficult it is. We have to satisfy all the dependencies at times. Otherwise, you'll have the dependency errors while you're including that specific libraries into your project. So now going to the Spring AOP. AOP is aspect oriented programming. I haven't included AOP in this particular course, but probably I'll just give you an insight about it because this is added into the Spring Boot schedule, but still I'll give you a heads up on that. So now you can see the dependency for Spring AOP is Spring Core and Spring Beans. I guess we already downloaded both, correct? Spring Core, Spring Beans have got downloaded. Spring Context got downloaded, and Spring Context depends on Spring AOP, so we need to download Spring AOP as well. But if it's a Maven, we don't need to instruct all these things because it has an IntelliSense in it to automatically go and have all the intrinsic dependencies to be downloaded. Okay, and that is called as a transitive dependencies. Transitive dependencies are the dependencies which are in the hierarchy of child level. All the child level will be downloaded automatically. And now it's all about the Spring Expression. This is the last one that we need to have. And here, yeah, again, the base is Spring Core for this. So what it means is the compile dependency. This is required. So I go ahead. I'm sorry. I go ahead and download this Spring Expression as well. Let's keep it. So if we want to be more accurate, right? If we think of having to be more accurate, you can still go to the Spring Core and just look at the Spring JCL. And you can download that as well in place. This is the rootmost. It says 0 dependencies. So from JCL, there's no more dependencies are there. So you can just keep it. Just a second, I'll just consume some water. Okay, so now let's go into the directory and see what are all the jars that we have downloaded. Okay, so that seems to be pretty nice that we have all stacked up in the same place. So this is what is all about. Right. So now what we have to do is we have to import all these libraries, the jars, into our project. So what a Spring Core application needs is all these libraries essentially. I'm just talking about only the Spring Core. I'm not talking about the other libraries like Spring MVC or Spring JDBC. For Spring JDBC, we need to go for Spring JDBC jar. For Spring MVC, we have to go for Spring MVC, Spring Web MVC jars. So it's more of a complex level to manage the dependencies manually. So that's the reason that we go for a Maven. So I have downloaded all the relevant jars, which you can right now copy them and keep it in some reasonable directory where you can easily access them. So I guess I created okay. So this is the right place. I'll just create one folder and keep the name as Spring Core Jars, right? And right inside to it, you just drop the jars that you've copied. All the 6 items, I'm just dropping into this directory. Okay, that's great. So if you have any questions till this flow, please let me know. If there is any important question that I will address, or else also you can make a note of it. So at the end of the 30 minutes, we'll have a casual conversation to get things understood. But if in case you have any queries, please let me know. All these are manual steps.
So when I try to create a project in that Spring tool shoot, it will showing the building UI model error.
Built-in UI modeler. What do you mean by that?
Building UI model error. I don't know what is that error.
Now, what kind of a screen are you seeing? Who's that? Who's having challenge? Hello.
This is Joshua, sir.
Yes, Joshua. So yeah, tell me.
Sir, when I creating the project through the Spring Starter, it will showing the building UI model has encountered a problem.
Yeah, I told you right that you are not supposed to do the Spring Starter project, right?
Yeah, I'm not doing that, but I instead of that I creating the Java project using Cradle. Again, it shows the encountered error.
Okay, that might be because of your dependencies unavailability.
Okay.
Okay, because you don't have the libraries downloaded. The offline download is required. See, if it is a Maven, right? So we need to have the local repository.
Okay.
The same way for Gradle, you need to have the local repository set up. If you have challenge in that, then literally it's because of that the setup problem only. We'll get to know that probably tomorrow. I'll be working on with Maven, right? So you will have more inputs on that.
Okay, sir. Sure.
So you are able to see the project like this?
Yeah. No. Instead of that,
Oh,
up to the demo it came. After that, it's not.
the project is created or not? Hello. Hello, Joshua. I guess you are on mute.
Again facing the building UI model. Okay, sir. Continue after.
No. Okay, let make it simple. What is my question is, are you able to see the project on your project explorer or package explorer like this? The project is there.
No. When I'm typing that e-commerce and I'm creating that project, it will shows that error.
Okay, I got it. So on the wizard itself, you are facing a problem, correct?
Yes, sir.
Excellent. That's because of that issue. Okay, we'll resolve that probably later. Okay, so yeah, coming to this, now we are done with this libraries, right? So I guess you got an idea of what this means. Okay, so one is we have downloaded the jars from the Maven repositories and we have kept it in some safe directory. And now we need to import these jars, right? All these jars into the project. So let's go right click the project, go to the properties, Java build path. You have a section called libraries here. Hope you can see that, right? We have libraries. Now, this is the place where you will actually drop all the libraries that you have right now. So go to the class path, looking at the class path, keeping the marker in, highlighted on the class path. Add external jars, right? Or else you can add one library and then you can add them. It's up to you. But right now I'm just choosing add external jars. And we have to drive right into the directory where we placed all the jars. So we'll go from here itself. So you can see I'm selecting all the 6 jars and you open them, it all gets added into it. If you want to group them into one specific group, okay, then literally you can add a library and then you can do it. So it's more similar like this. Add a library, okay, user library, hit next, user libraries, you can create new, give a name for it. So let's say Spring Core jars, so that we are disciplining ourselves by making a proper approach of adding the jars. Okay, it's a disciplined way to create the libraries. So you can create one Spring Core jars, and now you can look out for the add external jars. And the same way you can add all, open them, it gets added into this library, the one which we created. A custom name is given, it's just a grouping up, that's it. Apply and close, finish. So we don't need this, we don't need them, so we can remove them, which is floated without having any groups, right? So it just was floating out, hanging abruptly. Now it's more reasonable. So Spring Core jars means if you expand, you will see all the list of jars out. Is that clear? So by this way, you can do it. I'll once again explain. From the class path, you can go for add library, user library, hit next, user libraries button, create a new group name. After creating it, select that group and then add external jars and apply and finish. If you feel that it seems to be too complex, it's better don't create any groups. Just click on the class path, go straight away into the add external jars, choose all the jars and add it into it. It's up to you. Okay, now I'm applying and closing it. So once I apply and close, now you should notice that there is a Spring Core jars library group is added. By drilling down, you'll further notice that there are 6 libraries are integrated into that group. Is that clear? Hope this makes sense. This is how manually we add a libraries into a particular project. And the library that we are looking forward is Spring Core libraries. When I say Spring Core application, what is required? AOP, beans, context, core, expression, JCL. Okay, so these are as I said, JCL seems to be not essential, but still it's good to have the JCL as well. So now looking at this, the list of jars, if in case you want to add more, then sure you can have the the libraries to be kept added as and when required. So that's not an issue. You can create more groups and add them as well. Like for example, if you want to have ORM, object relational mapping libraries like Hibernate, go ahead. If you want to use iBatters or whatever it is, you group them and then add them manually. Okay, I'm little bit of manual guy. Okay, because I love to be little manual because I learn a lot rather than going more automated. Okay, Maven seems to be a little automated, and that's what we are going to see going forward. Because it's a time consuming, right? We don't have much of a time, so it's stipulated we have only 24 hours, so I cannot do everything manually, but I'm a little manual guy when it comes to setting up things. So that's how it is. Okay, great. Now we are done with adding the libraries. Are we good to go to create a Spring Core application? Yes, of course, we are good to go. Okay, but before going to it, what is the Spring framework is all about, and what is something special? Can't we create an application without having a Spring framework? Yes, of course we can do that, and that's how we have been doing it for ages. That is how exactly we have been doing for ages, right? So obviously then why is that we need to go for a Spring framework? Why suddenly a Spring framework comes into the picture? The intention of a Spring framework, I'll just give you a small history. I won't take much of a time. So the intention of bringing the Spring framework is not exactly to bring up a kind of an end-to-end development of application. That's not the main focus was. The main focus was actually the guy who was focused in developing this framework. Okay, that person's mindset was to create a framework that will ease up the job of enterprise application development. In those days, probably when I started my career, right, at that time, enterprise development means the only thing that comes into our mind is EJB, Enterprise Java Bean. Okay, I started from that era. Okay, so EJB is like a mammoth technology to say. It's more complex. We had different versions of EJB, EJB 2.x and EJB 3.x. I survived in both versions. So I might be a right person to talk about the difference between those two versions. EJB 2.x is more of XML version. Okay, it's highly complex and more and more of configurations involved in it. We have to take care of transaction handling. We have to take care of instantiation of the components. Okay, there is something called entity beans you will be having. There's something called session beans. There's something called message driven beans, MDBs. So all these are manually being configured. And it's highly more complex. So the life cycles have to be taken care by the developer, right? And later comes the 3.x version of EJB, and that also has the similar complexity. But one advantage is annotations have got introduced, and that was little up easing up the developer's job. But the Spring was actually competing with that EJB, thinking that the developer's life should be made easy, not giving too much of complexities when it comes to the enterprise application development, because that stops the creativeness, right? So in the enterprise world, that too much of complexity of code or complexity workaround will stop your creativity. So that's the reason this guy have come up to compete with EJB. So the replacement for EJB is what Spring Framework was at the time when we started learning Spring. You're getting it? So now looking at this Spring Framework, if it is going to replace the EJB, but today is that what is the Spring Framework is? Absolutely not. Spring Framework have grown a massive direction. It grown in a massive direction, and it is now in a different approach. You name it, you will get it in Spring. You name it what you want to do in your application, enterprise application, you will get it in Spring. You want to create a microservice application, you get it. If you want a service to be registered in some services, you name it, you will get it. You have Spring Cloud, you have Spring Boot, you have Spring Spring microservice development libraries like Eureka, Netflix Eureka. You have Zool API for gateway mechanisms. You have Hystrix, integrations with Hystrix. You have JPA, Spring JPA. You name it, you will get it. Spring is a vast technology, and that's why still we have scope for Spring. Okay, if you are really a hardcore developer and you are in the Java track, then 100% you would have come across in many interviews, or probably whenever you were into or in any application development or in any client interactions, you would have come across this Spring as the as the main theme. It's not for just the replacement of EJB anymore. Okay, so then what is special? Why Spring? Why the choice of Spring? Because it makes the life simpler. Is that in the reality, is that true? No, it is not. In reality, it is not true. It is not that easy actually to say. Spring is a little complex. At the initial time learning is, yes, of course, it's going to be complex. But if you streamline the workflow, then sure, it's going to be pretty easy. Okay, great. So what it does majorly is it will help you out in managing the dependencies. Okay, managing the dependencies. I use this dependencies in many places. This term dependencies means different in different places. When I was talking about the libraries, also I did use a term called dependency. That dependency is different, and the dependency which I'm trying to define right now for understanding the Spring is different. Please make a note of it. Maven is a dependency management tool. It's different because it manages the dependencies, means the project which is dependent on the jars, the libraries are managed by the Maven. Now the managing the dependencies, what I mean here is different in Spring. Okay, so dependencies term varies, the definition varies based on the different situation. So dependencies, what I mean here is the object dependency. Okay, that is something very important to make a note of it. So for what dependencies I was talking about is the library dependencies, the jar dependencies, right? This is what we were dependent on. So manually I loaded them, I imported them into the project, and we are done with the dependencies for this particular project. Because the project is going to be developed on top of Spring, means you need all the Spring libraries. I can even call that as a dependencies from the project point of view, but those are library dependencies. But now what I'm talking about is object dependencies. Object dependencies are different. Object dependencies are entirely different, right? So objects, you know what objects are. I don't want to define them again here, right? So you know what objects are. In object-oriented programming system, everything is made up of object. So you create a class and you create an object for it, and you wire the object in a dependent manner manually. Okay, so the object dependencies can be automated in Spring. That is the theme. Okay, so if you go for a generic interview and if a person asks what is special in Spring framework, why do you opt for a Spring framework, then obviously the answer is going to be yes, the framework is helping us in automating the object dependencies. So technically speaking, we call it as a dependency management, but we have another term called dependency injection. Okay, injecting the dependencies means injecting the object which is dependent for one workflow or logic. Okay, if one logic is going to depend on one object, then you need to bring that object and inject it. Okay, and that's what we call it as a dependency injection. So inject the object, but who will inject? The architecture of the Spring says that an IOC container is in place. IOC container is in place, and that IOC container is going to inject the object dependencies wherever required. Okay, so let's say, for example, I ask for a car. Okay, I ask for a car. Now, when I ask for a car, okay, I need not construct the car by itself. Okay, rather it's been cooked up and it will be readily available whenever I ask for it. Okay, so here it is like an object. So literally what we do is we go ahead and create a new car, and that's not what is going to happen anymore, because this is manual injection. Manual means I manually create an instance, and that instance is referred by a reference variable, which is Hyundai, and Hyundai is a car. And you are able to access all the features of Hyundai. But Hyundai will have all the car features like four wheels or engine or the accelerators or steering wheels or whatever it is. The windshield, you name it. You have all the features in that. But the question is, are we going to cook up this object? The object, what I mean is the instance. Are we going to do this? No. In Spring, this is going to be outsourced. I'm going to outsource it. Outsource, right? And that's what we do here in India. All IT projects are outsourced, right? So all European, the European vendors are outsourcing their work to us, right? So similarly, the developer is not going to do the job of creating an instance. Rather, it's going to be outsourced to the IOC container. Okay, IOC container is going to be the heart of Spring framework. You can even call it that way. It's the heart of Spring framework. If you don't have IOC container in place, then obviously you don't have Spring framework. That's the understanding. So everything deals with IOC container. Okay. Actually, I have my digital, writing pad, but unfortunately I have my pen nib broken, so I'm unable to write it down. You can see my things are moving here, so you can see I'm unable to write it. I can only place the dots. So what actually happens is I can give you more explanations on the diagram. Okay, what is that actually happening? I'll try to set this up by today so that tomorrow you'll have more visual explanations. So what I mean here is the outsource part is done to this container, IOC container. Inversion of control. IOC means inversion of control. Okay. A lot of things you are saying. Where do I go and get all these informations? And if you ask me, you have to do a little bit of researching. Stay active on Google and try to hit the word IOC container and see what the definitions are. Inversion of control. Okay. Inversion of control, IOC is something very, very important. Inversion of control. Dependency injection. Okay, dependency injection, inversion of control. So it's more similar terms. Okay, so inversion of control meaning is inversion of control. Control is like taking control of some work, or creating an instance is one control. You can inverse that control to someone else. Inverse it, rather than we create. We means the developer or the programmer who creates an instance manually by feeding in all the essential initialization values for the car and the constructor, and also looking out for the dependencies for it. Instead of we do it, we hand it over to the IOC container. Inversion of control container, it is called as. Okay, inversing the way we are going to create an instance. That's what it means. So I'm not going to do this anymore. Alternatively, you can call this as tightly coupled environment. Okay, this is actually a tightly coupled environment, which I'm going to convert them to a loosely coupled. Okay, it's going to be loosely coupled. Tightly coupled, loosely coupled. So tightly coupled meaning is, what I'll just give you a small gist because we'll not have much time to go more in deep of the theory. Let's say car. Okay, and I'm having an initial value for the number of wheels as 4. Okay, this is how we have coded, and your application is up and running. And suddenly the client comes and says, hey, I knew that the car needs 4 wheels, but we need to include that as a default in the initial time itself by having 5 wheels, keeping the stepney also in place. Okay, the backup wheel. And that's a default part in my car feature. Okay, I don't want, it's a default part. So I need to add that as well in the default, in the initial time itself. Now what we do is we all the way come down to the code and then change the default value from 4 to 5. So 4 wheels plus 1, which is a backup wheel, is the default value for the number of wheels in car. Okay, that's a great deal. But the problem is, if in case you have some 200 classes which is depending on this car object, in all the 200 classes, we need to perform this change uniquely, consistently. Correct. But we have different ways. You just search all and then you replace it. That's a different story. But ideally, traditionally, and more professionally, if you see, you have to manually do the change in 200 classes. Now this main class, this e-commerce main class, the main method is depending on this car object, and that is initial value is 5. But what if in case this style of code which you have used in different classes, 200 plus classes or 150 plus classes, all the places we need to manually go and change. And that's why we are tightly dependent on the code, tightly coupled to the code, right? Tightly coupled to the code. But if I remove this all the way and someone is going to inject, then it's not my job. In all the 200 classes, it will be like a question mark. So someone is going to do that job. And that someone is going to be the container. The container is going to take care of instantiating it, setting it from outside. It's going to inject the object, the instance, what I mean. And by that way, if there is a change on the wheel, of course, we need to do a configurations for this to instruct the container to do the job. But what I mean here is uh, the change that you make, okay, the change which we are going to make is going to be done only in the configuration code. Configuration code, right? It's going to be in the configuration code, but not on all the 200 classes. 200 classes. I'm not going to do the change on all the 200 classes. I'm going to do the change only in one file called configuration file, and there where I'm going to change the value from 4 to 5, and the IOC will be inclined to that configuration code, and whenever it's creating an instance, it will create the instance with the default value of that 5. And whenever you approach the container to request for an instance, the cooked up instance will be injected into the specific places. So ideally, you will never see a code of creating a new instance henceforth. You will not see that anymore. New car, we are not going to do that. This is the main mantra of Spring Framework. Managing the object dependencies are the key mantra. Okay. Or probably we can call it as a selling point. Okay. You are not entitled to create an instance. But beyond this, having this as a small change, this has impact in many places. As we go along with the code, you will understand that. But right now, you just closely look at that. Whenever we create an instance, it's something that we do it manually. But when we outsource it, it's the IOC container, Spring IOC container will do it, will take care of it. But how it is going to do, how we are going to create a configuration code, all these we will see on the fly. But this is the theme. Spring Framework main thing is managing the object dependencies, and it all starts from the Spring Core. Spring Core is the one who's having the container, IOC container in it. And the most important part here is the context. Spring context. The Spring context is one important library, okay, which you need to have a look at it. Anyways, we have other dependencies also, but the context plays a major role. If you have any questions, please let me know. I guess I've spoken much. Now it's your turn to speak out if in case you have any questions. No questions? Hope you all
I
are
would
awake.
like, yeah, I would like to clarify one thing. Like for managing the object dependencies, is that like the library files that we have installed, like beans, context, from that we will utilize those jar files in order to managing dependencies in our code. Is that like that?
Uh,
As yeah, you have mentioned like it will automatically. We don't have to write manually for instantiating the object. So I'm just curious to know about that.
yeah, see, no, actually, can you come again with your question? Let me understand your question first before I give the answer.
Okay, so when we create the object, we are like manually car Hyundai. You gave some example, car Hyundai equal to new car. So by using the Spring framework, you have mentioned like we don't have to do it in manual. So will it be like pointing to the jar libraries or and do that process in automatic manner? How it will be like replacing that manual thing?
Yeah. Your point is a valid point. Yes, of course. The logic behind who does the job or how it is done, it's all a code work, right? So we have this container available in this library.
Okay.
Okay, we have this container available in this library, and the container is triggered. Okay, at the
Okay.
time of runtime, right? At the time of
Okay.
launching your application, the container is triggered, and the container code will actually do the job of creating those instances and keep it in a object pool.
Okay.
So how the container knows that it has to create a car object? IOC container is not a artificial intelligence code. It can't do it by itself. It can't predict. Okay. So someone have to feed that information to the IOC container. If you feed it, it will do it. So
Okay.
yes, of course, that is the reason that we go for using all these libraries one by one. Okay.
Okay.
But if you see, the
Okay.
most important thing is you have to look at this one, the Spring core and the Spring context, literally. Okay. So the Spring
Okay.
core, if I expand, sorry, you can see there are a lot of libraries here, right? I'm sorry, a lot of packages, right? So these are all the required packages to make this container work intact.
Okay.
Okay, but what these libraries will technically do, we might not be aware of, and we don't need to go to that depth of understanding. But yes, of course, the containers, the IOC container logic is enabled via these jars. If you don't have this jar, then obviously the IOC container is not in place.
Okay.
So yeah, now uh, like this, as I said, right, this creation of car, the code will be typed here. It means in the runtime they will come and write that code here. Not like that. It doesn't mean like that. It is actually, what it means is, it's all about a task called wiring. It just do the wiring, runtime wiring. Okay, so on the fly, or we can call it as on the fly wiring. Okay, based on the configuration. So what I mean by wiring, we will discuss more in detail based on the configuration. You're getting it? So what happens here is, based on the configuration part, we will have some XML configuration, or we will have a Java based configuration combined with annotations. Either way, either an XML based configuration or a Java based configuration, doesn't matter, but you need a configuration in place. If you have a configuration in place, then you bind that configuration to the IOC container. You're getting it?
Okay. Okay.
So once you bind that configuration to the IOC container, when you launch your application, or when you run your application, or when you deploy your application, your IOC container will get triggered. Okay, based on the code, it will get triggered, and the container will read the informations from the configuration file. And in the configuration file, I have given the details saying that, hey container, please create an object for car by having a default value of 5 for the number of wheels. I will give that feeded informations in that. I'll keep that feeded informations in that, and that will be handed over to the IOC container, where the container read that information at the runtime, and accurately it will create an object according to the definitions that you've given in the configuration file, and it will launch those objects. I'm sorry, it will keep those objects in the object pool.
Okay.
When you execute that piece of logic, when you go to that particular function and call that function, at that time when the function needs that object, again it will invoke the IOC container asking for, hey, please give me one object. And dynamically, the object will be wired. Where it will
Okay.
get wired, it will get wired here. So those are invisible things. We can only
Okay, yeah.
understand up in an abstract mode like this.
Yeah, now I can understand the flow. Thank you.
Probably this is theoretically I'm still saying, but as we go along with more codes, you will understand how physically the IOC container can be invoked. How are we going to invoke the IOC container? That's something very important, right? So how do we invoke is something we will learn about it shortly. But right now the overall theme is this. So yeah, do anyone have any other question? Please let me know.
Sir, shall we say Spring IOC container is managing the object dependency with the help of inversion of control?
Just a second, I'm sorry. Yeah, please come again.
Yeah, shall we say Spring IOC container responsible for managing the object dependency with the help of IOC inversion of control?
Exactly. Yeah, managing the dependencies. It's not just about managing the dependency. It is also distributing the dependencies whenever required, is also taken care by the IOC container. That's why I stated IOC container is the heart of a Spring.
IOC container means it's providing the object wherever we require, right?
Exactly.
IOC inversion of control.
Just a second. IOC container is like, physically, if you want to understand, it's like a bucket. Let's assume, okay, just for understanding purpose, I'm saying it's like a bucket. IOC container is like a bucket. Now the IOC container, what it does is it will create the objects based on the configurations that we have given, and it will put all the objects in that bucket. Okay. Whenever you ask in the project, when the project is deployed and the application is running, dynamically, whenever you approach for the object, the IOC container, the bucket, from the bucket, the object is taken and handed over to the respective code. And that logic is what we call it as a wiring. A dynamic wiring is happening. Okay, and that's why probably you might be well aware of these terms. Somewhere down the lane, we have something called auto wiring. There is a manual wiring and there's auto wiring also. We'll talk about that. Okay. So how this term comes in is because we are trying to inject that. The IOC container is injecting the object into it, into the place where you want it. So now the question is, how come this container knows that it has to provide the object of car here? How the container knows it? The container knows it based on the type that you have here. The type is what? Car. And since I've marked it as an auto wiring, these annotations are IOC container referred annotations. Okay, so these are Spring annotations actually. To talk about it is a Spring core annotations. These annotations are exclusively helping the IOC container to understand that this piece of reference variable requires an object of type car. And that will be handed over by the IOC container. So frequently we'll be using the term called IOC container here. Hope that makes sense. If you still have a question, please let me know.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Sir, then that IOC container is having predefined functionalities, right?
Yeah, of course. Predefined functionality in sense, it also includes the handling of lifecycle management.
Okay.
The objects
through that features only, we can take the values from here, right?
Come again?
Like that, suppose that IOC container is having take 3 objects from this car. Predefined any functionalities is there in that IOC container?
I'm not getting your point. What do you mean by functionality here?
Actually, through this, like that you said auto wiring. Auto wiring means it will pick up the objects from this car and it put it in there in that IOC container. Like that you're telling, right?
Yeah. So what auto wiring means is auto wiring is we don't need to give. I told you, right? We
Yes.
need a bit of configuration. Okay, we need to do a bit of configurations wherever in place. So auto wiring, what it does is this annotation, what it does exactly is we need not perform a manual configuration. Auto wiring, remove this word. Let's take it as wiring. Okay, I only have a term called wiring, not an annotation. Wiring means manually, okay, manually will perform a wiring here, and that is with the job of, like, let's say, for example, setters and getters. We haven't gone to that level, so it's slightly difficult to understand. We create a getters and setters, and the getters and setters are the way to inject the object into this reference variable. So what does that getters and setters mean? So let's say car Hyundai, right? So what you will have is, let's say, get Hyundai. Okay, then you will have a function called set Hyundai. You're getting it? So now what happens is set meaning is to set the object of Hyundai to this reference variable. So how I will do it? You will call this Hyundai by saying this dot. I've misspelled it. This dot Hyundai, referring to that reference variable, and this setter will have a local type. I'm sorry. Right, and you will assign here. This seems to be a little round robin. Don't get panicked. Okay, let's understand that setting the object by using a setter. But nowhere I'm using that new keyword. If you notice here, nowhere we have used the new keyword. Now, this I need to do manually. I need to write the code of set Hyundai here and instruct the IOC container to cook up the object of car and use the setter method to set this to the reference variable of Hyundai. So what happens is in the setter method, the object of this local reference will get the actual instance cooked up by the IOC container, and the IOC once it is handed over from the IOC container, the object is assigned to this reference variable. If in case you want to retrieve this object, this Hyundai, you can use the get Hyundai and say return this dot Hyundai, right? And the return type is going to be a car. So you have a getters and setters in place. You're getting it. So we'll understand this more detail, not to worry. But since you asked that question, I'm just saying. Now I will not do any of these such code. When I use a annotation called at auto wiring, when I do at auto wiring, what I mean is we don't need to do these part. It is internally taken care by the IOC container to automatically inject the object straight away into this reference variable. We are not going to do these jobs. These are enhancements. These annotations are the growth of the Spring framework. Okay, as we come along with different versions, right? So they have started to introduce more of annotations to reduce your lines of code in your application. But this is the first approach. This is the first approach to manually inject the object to this variable from the external context. Who's your external context? Is your IOC container. He is the one who's sitting outside your code, not inside the code. Right? This is my code. No one is sitting inside my code. He is an external entity. That external entity is going to make use of this setter method in order to inject the object to the reference variable of Hyundai. There is a conclusion. Does it make sense? If you still have a question, please let me know. No worries. We still have to go a long way. So this is only from the fundamental point we are trying to understand. Not even we are understanding. We are trying to get to the point of how an IOC container can do the job. So technically, I'll give you this so that today you'll have some relaxed sleep out of this confusion. I have something called application context. Okay, so this it's an interface. Okay, application context is an interface. This application context interface is going to be the representative of IOC container. You were asking, right, how an IOC container would look like. Physically, we cannot see them, but we can represent them. How we can represent them? Using this term called application context. So the context, application context, okay, this application context, let's say a type of application context is class path application context. And here I'm going to feed in abc.xml. Now what you can understand from this is, for a while you just get rid of all these codes. Okay. Now what this means is, this particular context, which is carrying an instance of class path application context, having a argument in the constructor as abc.xml. What you can derive from here is, this context object is the representative of the IOC container in the Spring library. Now you need to hand over the configuration to the IOC container, correct? Because we the one who create the configuration file and say how the instance have to be created. And that part will be written here in the XML file. In the XML file, I will jot down the way how an instance have to be instantiated, and how to how to relate the dependencies internally will all be given in this abc.xml. And this XML file is getting handed over to the class class path application context. I'm sorry, it's called as class path application context. This instance is actually the representative of the IOC container. Simple. By this approach only, we hand over the configuration file to the IOC container, and the IOC container will read everything from this XML file, and accordingly it will start creating the object. Keep ready of all the objects in the pool. Whenever you request for auto wiring, or you go for getters and setters manual wiring, it will start injecting the object one by one. So if someone asks you how you can relate an IOC container, you can say the representative of the IOC container is nothing but application context. When I say application context, what it means is IOC container. Application context is nothing but IOC container. We can conclude in that way. Is that clear? If you have any questions, please let me know.
Instead of that, we can tell directly it is XML file. You said some file name.
Some file name.
That XML, if someone asks how you represent me, XML file, no? Instead of that. You said, Sabri, that XML file is having the some instant features. It will go to that context through that only IOC container will work, right?
Correct. Yes, correct. We are actually, this line is actually like enabling the IOC container. We can consider in that way. This line is actually enabling the IOC container by handing over the XML. XML is a configuration file which has all the rules on how to create an instance and give it and cook it. For example, the car object, how many value, what will be the default value? Instead of 4, it will be. So if you change from 5 to 6, I want 6 wheels in my car, as the client says, where you will go and change that 6 instead of 5?
In that class file.
Exactly. You no, not in the class file. It means you will do it in the XML.
Okay.
You're getting it?
Yeah,
You'll deliberately do it in the XML. So what happens is, you're not touching the code ideally here. You're getting it? So the configuration file is the important file from where the IOC fetches all the related information. But we are not going to use XML XML more frequently because we have Java-based configuration. We'll combine with annotations and Java-based configuration to simplify the developer's life. Initially, the Spring developers used to work with XML configurations. They hard code everything in the XML. Now what they say is, hey, you don't need to use XML. You better make use of a Java configuration file and annotations, which would help you to reduce your complexity, because we don't need to learn XML, right? Or you should not meddle with XML, complex XML tags and syntaxes. Rather, you can write your configurations in your own language, the Java language. You can write your configurations in the Java language itself, and that is what we call it as a Java-based configuration. If you write it in XML, then it is called as an XML-based configuration. Since we have enhanced, since the Spring have grown a long way, it has started to accept even Java-based configuration rather than meddling with XML. But this is just an example I'm saying. If it's an XML-based configuration, you hand over the XML to the context, and the context is the representative of the IOC. So IOC will make use of that XML file to work around with creation of objects and so on. Okay, you will still have a lot of doubts. Okay, that's because we don't see something physically. Okay, we only take it to our brain in an abstract manner. So we don't have a physical workflow of how this IOC container is doing its job. But basically, this piece of information is more sufficient in order to move forward with the Spring framework. Okay, the thing that you have to keep it in mind is application context is the representative of the IOC container. As simple as that. If anyone have any further questions, please do let me know. Okay, so I guess we'll have 5 minutes of break. I thought I'd give a break in between, but we just like that went off. Probably meanwhile, you can just refresh yourself and come back. If you have any questions, we'll go. Otherwise, we'll move forward. So 5 minutes of break. Hello. Am I audible now? Please confirm.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, let me have one last try. Mm, Okay, so I'm still unable to use this pen effectively. Let me check this. Yeah. Yeah, so if you still have any questions, please do let me know. Meanwhile, I'll try to create one small class. If you have questions, please raise it now.
Sir, this is Jayanti.
Yeah,
Um,
please. Yes, Jay. Yeah.
Sir, so configuration file should be always the XML file, correct, sir? Or we can give some other file format.
Yeah, that's what I mentioned, right? So you don't need. There are two approaches in Spring framework. Okay. Currently, we have XML-based configuration, which is still acceptable, or you can have Java-based configuration. What I mean is, I can just go ahead and create a configuration file like this. Okay, I can create a Java class like this, and here you can enable your configurations. Okay, an annotation called @configuration. This class will be marked as configuration class. But traditionally, how it happens is in the resources directory, you can just go ahead and create one XML file. And you can just mark them as application.xml. Any name would suffice, but I'm giving a more standard name called application.xml. And in this application.xml, you are entitled to define all your configurations. So let's say, for example, I can even do it the other way. Actually, it's an XML. Okay, I'll get you that. We will have the option here, which will help us to have the automated way to add all the XSD informations, the schema informations. In the XML means we need a schema definitions. Okay, we are supposed to have a schema definitions to have all the tags, configuration tags. We have we'll be starting like this. Beans. Okay, and we call it as bean here. Okay, bean is Why beans on the top is because a collection of bean. Sorry. Okay. So this is how we actually configure the Spring configuration XML file. You will have collection of beans inside a beans tag. So you'll have as many number of bean. Means bean is nothing but representation of the class for which the dependencies need to be enabled. So you will create those bean inside these beans class tags, and then you will hand over this application. Okay, post giving all the configuration details, you will hand over them to this application context. Now what will be the XML name is application.xml. Hope you are getting it. Application.xml. But what if in case actually it should be represented as class path XML application? I'm sorry. So class path XML application is a type of application context which will accept the input of configuration file as XML file. And we have already created a configuration file called application.xml. Inside this, you will do all your definition of beans and hand it over to the application context. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
For Java-based configuration also, we have a type of application context. Okay. We'll see that as we go along. We will be seeing that the different types of application context. There, what you will hand over is not the XML file. Instead, you will hand over this e-commerce configuration dot class. This file will be there, and here what you will do is you will do all the the bean configurations, like how there the tag called bean, right? Here we use a tag called bean, but here you will use an annotation called bean. So which way would be more comfortable for us is like the Java based configuration, because we will write it in our own language, known language, the Java language, rather than dwelling into this XML tags, and then in the bean you will be having the bean ID, okay, the name, okay, the class. So a lot of configurations which you have to the attributes which you have to use in order to create one bean class. In Spring, everything is going to be considered as bean. Okay, every class is going to be called as a bean class. So what the IOC container will manage? The IOC container will manage all the beans, and they are called as Spring beans. So Spring bean management tool is what is your IOC container is. So what a bean will represent? Bean is representing the instance. Java bean, you would have heard about it, right? So bean is nothing but an instance representation. So the instance of the bean or the Spring bean by itself will be managed by the IOC container, including the life cycle of that bean. Okay, including the life cycle of the bean will be managed. So if you look at the Java based configuration, so we use @bean, and then we will create a function here. Deliberately we'll be creating a function, let's say car, and create car. Okay, and inside this you will just say return new car off. Now you will have a lot of questions again. So this is our configuration. Now this will be handed over to the container. The container will look out all the method which are annotated with bean, and it will look at the syntax, and the syntax says creation of new car with the input parameters 5. So now what technically happens is it looks like a traditional Java method, but this is actually a configuration code, Java based configuration code. Java based configuration code. I'm just giving a highlight. It's just a trailer. What we are seeing here is, okay, or could be a teaser even, because to that end level we need to dig more in detail. So Java based configuration code for IOC. Okay. So just have this in mind. Either it can be an XML or it can be your Java based configuration. That is the meaning.
Got it, sir. Thanks.
Okay, so So what I'm doing here is for a generic purpose, I've just created this product service. Okay, this product service, it's just a class, right? And this product service is going to have public void, let's say, place order. This might not be more meaningful, but just for our understanding, we have a function, and this will have a sysout statement saying place an order for book. Hope you are getting it. So this is just a functionality, okay, where you will write some piece of logic ideally, but just look at this method. Okay, it's just a method, right? A Java method, and this is the class. Now simulate this. You have to simulate them over here in the e-commerce main. Okay. So let's say the e-commerce main needs the product service object. So traditionally, how we do? We just go ahead and say product service of okay, we don't have car, right? Okay. So in product service, we have this. Right now, I don't have any error other than the application just beans. Okay. So right now you can see there's no errors being highlighted on my project, but in the main, you have created the product service, and ideally you just use that object directly, product service. So, product service dot place an order. You're going to invoke the method. Since it's an e-commerce portal, we are going to place an order. So product service is going to have a function called place order, and we invoke them. And we can just go ahead and run them directly. But this is ultimately not an Spring-based application, because we don't use any of the Spring's features out here. Console buffer size too low, 80,000, about 2 times slower. Okay, let it remind me later. Okay, so what you can see here is the output of the particular functionality, place an order for a book. So the order is placed. That's what the understanding is. Now I'm going to create one more class intentionally. Okay, a class called, let's say, mobile app. Okay, and here again we are going to use, actually it should not be a main method, but anyway, it's not an issue. We just have a main method there again. Ideally in a single standalone application, there should be only one class which contains a main method. Okay, but this is only for demonstrative purpose. I'm just using this. Okay, right. So let's go ahead and import them. Now you notice that there's a mobile app, and also you have a e-commerce main, okay, which is depending on product service. Correct? Both the classes are depending on product service. So you go to the mobile app and then you run them. Still you will get the response. Not at all an issue, because we have manually created an instance. Okay, so there's a manual creation of the instances there, and you can see the output is there still. So like which, as I said, there might be hundreds of classes which might depend on product service. But ultimately, if you look at the product service, fortunately, there's no much of a difference here. But if in case the dependencies are going to be highly coupled, tightly coupled, okay, I mean, obviously it is tightly coupled. What could be the major challenge? The major challenge could be the way you use your instantiation part. So let's say I have a constructor with a parameter, or this time it's without a parameter, but let's take it to be a parameter, string product type. So I have something called string product type. A variable, a reference variable, this dot the, sorry, it's not copied. It's the product type. So the local variable reference have been assigned. Now, it's concatenate to this dynamic property called product type. This might not be more of a meaningful, but I'm just creating a constructor, and then there is a property and the field, and the field is getting the value via the constructor. Okay, it's an argumented constructor, what you're seeing right now. Now you should immediately notice that there is an error. Can you all notice that? In both the classes, e-commerce main and mobile app, there is an error highlighting. Why there is an error?
Both classes having main package.
Both classes are having dependency of
Product service.
product service. And initially, while we created an instance, at that time we were in an assumption that it is a no argumented constructor,
Yeah.
kept it with the default constructor, right? So we created an instance without passing any parameter. But now there is only the existence of, argumented constructor. How we can deal this? We can deal it pretty easily because default constructor is overwritten, right? Default constructor is overwritten into the argumented constructor. So what we can do here ideally is we can just go ahead and have one no argumented constructor. Now you will see the difference. No errors. So errors are disappearing. Why the errors got disappeared is because we launched a no argumented constructor as well. So while you create an instance, the constructors are the one which is invoked, right? In order to complete its instantiation part. So it automatically picks up the no argumented constructor over here rather than going and forcibly looking for the argumented by default, right? So now there is no problem. But now what the client says is, okay, the client says is, hey, please make this constructor a bit of obsolete. I don't want this type of argumented constructor. So when I'm sorry, no argumented constructor. So when we have that that piece of information from the client, immediately we will come down and then remove that constructor. Just for a use case, I'm saying. So when we do this, then automatically when I save, again the error pops up. See, Spring Framework is not about eliminating this kind of an errors. I'm just simulating. Spring Framework architecture is something more of a profound architecture that cannot be compared just by showing these errors. But to make you people figure out the better way to understand, I'm just showing this. Okay, now if there are 300 classes and all the 300 classes, the error will be popped up. And that's why in those days, we will be coming up with a factory class. Okay, the factory class will do the cookup of an object. But again, there is a little bit of workaround happens in the factory class. Managing too many factory classes are pretty hard. Even though you have a factory class, you have to have the object lifecycle management to be manually done. When the object should go to the garbage, okay, how the objects can be managed, when the object is nullified. A lot of complexities will be there still if you go for factory method design pattern. But let's forget about those factory patterns as of now. With the help of a spring, I can eliminate this problem. How I can eliminate this problem? The problem occurs, it's because it's tightly coupled. This class is tightly coupled with this class. That's what we call it as a tight coupling. Now what will happen is, I'm not going to give this instance at all anymore. I'm not going to do a manual instantiation part. Okay, there's going to be no manual instantiation of the variable, right? For the reference variable. Let's say, for example, temporarily I'm giving null, but that's not the right approach, right? So by this way, now what happens is the error is resolved. We are resolving the error, but that's not a right approach. Okay, so now you imagine, okay, if you imagine you go to the product service and the client is asking for one more parameter, okay, called the price in the constructor. You have to keep a default price for the product type. Now there is a couple more, there is one more argument added, and that ends up with a couple of arguments in the constructor. Now if it's a couple of argument in the constructor, even though we have two argumented constructor, there's no problem in the class. There's no error. Why there is no error? Because ideally we don't instantiate it manually, right? We have commented out. But the problem is when we run the application, obviously you will get an exception. What's the exception? A null pointer exception. Correct? You end up with a null pointer exception because deliberately the reference variable is null. You cannot use a reference variable null type to call a function. When a method is called on top of a null object or a null reference, obviously it will throw a null pointer exception. So what is the solution for this to avoid the null pointer exception? You better bring the manual instance. But when you bring the manual instance, the problem is what? The two argumented constructor problem comes. Okay, let's say time being I'm just giving this as a audio book. Okay, when I give this as an audio book, now what happens is still there's an error. Why there's an error? Any idea?
Because it accepts two argument constructor, right? We are providing only one.
Correct. So we have provided only one. So I just go ahead and say, okay, let's call it as a 200 INR. Now the problem is resolved. So whenever a new approach of constraint need to be added for the object mechanisms, you are entitled to make a change in the code because you are tightly coupled, because this class is tightly coupled with this instantiation part. And that's why we end up with this problem every time. If someone can take care of this work, even though if the client comes up with a new level of arguments or the parameters, the client can, the system, okay, the system can automate the part, and automatically with the help of intelligence, a little bit of intelligence, they can eliminate this problem of tightly coupled. When we remove this part, automatically we'll consider this style of code to be a loosely coupled code. What it means by loosely coupled? Loosely coupled meaning is, any change to that particular dependencies will not impact the class which is depending on that particular object. This class is no more going to be impacted because it's loosely coupled. Because of this unavailability of the manual instantiation part, I am not injecting it. When I'm not injecting it, then someone should inject. Who is that someone? That someone is nothing but IOC container. Now I need to enable the IOC container. Before even I enable the IOC container, I need to be very well aware of creating the configuration file first. Once we create a configuration file, then everything is in place. You are entitled to proceed further. But how it is all, how is it we can assemble everything together is what we need to wait and see how it can be progressed. So Spring Core is something very, very essential. We need to have more deep understanding of it. So as much as possible, I'm trying to impart the knowledge, whatever that I've acquired so far in my experience, the years of experience. So I'm trying to convey that at the best of my possibilities. Still, you might be having doubts. You should. Okay, if you are a new learner or first time learner, then you should have such kind of a doubts. You raise your queries internally to yourself and try to manipulate the learnings that you got and try to see if you can map to those questions. But as I said, of course, we can have better discussions to get your queries clarified. So this is how it is all going to be. So we'll be gearing up in order to configure the configuration class. So ideally, as I said, it could be either a Java-based configuration or it can be an XML-based configuration. One-time demonstration will be shown tomorrow via XML-based configuration, but we are not going to follow XML anymore because those eras are gone. Unless and until if the code is if your application is little or older application, okay, then obviously you might be meddling with XML. So I'll just throw some light on it. How do we actually do a configurations on XML? But we'll be sitting on top of the Java-based configuration throughout the course. Throughout the course, it's going to be only on Java-based configuration. Okay, I guess we have consumed a lot of information today, starting from the setting up of the IDE and creating a project, setting up of the library. Did you notice one thing? When I said configuration here, add configuration, right? And when I say control space, automatically it can detect that add configuration, and it is coming from org.springframework.context. Then you have something called org.springframework.beans. How come the IDE is able to recognize these things?
With the help of a Spring Bean dependency.
Yeah, it's because of the libraries that we have added, right? So these libraries are the one who's carrying all these Spring features or Spring elements. Spring Framework elements are there inside this library. One more observation is application context. If you look at the application context, from where the application context comes from, again, it's coming from the specific libraries. So if you see here, application context is an interface, correct? It's an interface, highlighting again and again here. It's an interface. org.springframework.context. See, context plays a major role here. Context library, this one. I'm talking about this one. If you look at this package, org.springframework.context, you just recall that you will see it inside the spring context. Okay, so the thing is, you can see the different types of application context here. We were using class path XML, right? When it comes to a Java-based configuration, we'll be using an annotation config application context. Because Java-based means it's combined with annotation. So you'll be using a type of application context at that time as annotation config application context. Different types of contexts are there. You do have file system XML application context. File system is typically where you will have some local systems drive where you will be placing your XML, and there you will be having the option to configure your XML and keep it over there. So, but anyways, those are little traditional way. But what I'm trying to explain here is the different types of application context. Okay, so all these are coming from these libraries. If you don't have these libraries in place, you'll be unable to refer these classes, interfaces, annotations. You will not have the option to do that. So you got the learning of how you manually load the libraries. And what are the essential libraries is like core, context, beans. The most important three libraries, core, context, beans. But on a whole, when we talk about the Spring Core, when you go for Maven application, Maven will automatically download these libraries, the dependencies. The transitive dependencies will be automatically referred. I'll just include only Spring context. Tomorrow you will get to know about those. I'll just use the Spring context. Automatically everything will be loaded in the Maven configurations. So this is something very important. Yeah. Okay. I guess we are running out of time, so we'll take up more queries if in case you have. Let's have, even if it's a simple question, you are authorized to ask, because it's a query time. So please go ahead. No questions?
So actually, we have seen few jars, spring jars, in the order, like the root will be JCL and next will be core, beans context, like that. Uh, should we maintain the same order in the pom.xml also while we are using Maven?
Order need not be maintained. Why we need to maintain the order? Because Maven is going to do that maintenance of the order.
Okay.
What you have to do in the Maven is you just need to go and instruct, hey, Maven, please give me the spring context. What the Maven will do is automatically, when you ask for spring context, it will go and look for all the dependencies, transitive dependencies. So it knows that because it's there in the pom.xml file, right? The pom file of the spring-context will give the clarity to the Maven to go and get all other dependencies to be auto-loaded. So which order it is going to maintain, that will be automated by Maven itself.
Okay, sir.
Hope you are getting it.
Yeah. Okay, sir.
But yeah, that's what that's what even we learn when we go for even Spring Boot. Spring Boot, if you are creating a Spring Boot application, you just look out for Spring context, automatically it will get added. But literally Maven, see in Maven what happens is you don't need to have the order maintenance. Okay, in any order you can add, that's not a problem, but there should be an existence of that jar, that's all. In which order you add doesn't matter. So just a second, let me give you a clarity here. Probably I have this dummy boot project. You can see it's a Spring Boot project. The flag of boot refers that it's a Spring Boot. So in the pom.xml, this is the one which you talk about, right? The dependency order. This can be in any order, doesn't matter. Okay, you can put your test first and then web. Okay. Not at all a deal, but the dependency should be there. That's all you need to look forward. So in the dependencies, if you see here, it can be in any order, doesn't matter.
Okay.
So here where we will go and pick the specific libraries. The problem that I have in my Mac operating system is I have the problem in the Maven currently. So that's what I'm trying to figure out from the morning. Actually, I had a interview panel work today. So from the morning I was a little engaged. So that's why you also received the meeting invite a bit late. So tomorrow it will be more interesting. So you can wait for it. So any other question?
Sir, shall we say IOC is the design pattern to manage the dependency? Is the design pattern, or it's an algorithm or technique?
See, IOC container is not a design pattern. Okay, but container dependency injections mechanisms are a kind of a design pattern. Okay, inversion of control, right? Inversion of control is a design pattern. IOC design pattern, we can say. But IOC container is not a design pattern. IOC container is physically an algorithm or a logic referring the IOC pattern.
Okay, thank you.
So let's say MVC, model view controller, right? So the web MVC we create model view controller part. MVC is a design pattern. But how do you apply the MVC design pattern? With the help of a controller. You will have a controller, servlet controller, right? So that acts as a controller. Model, you create a model class, the Pojo class, the bean class. The view is your JSP. So MVC pattern is applied through servlet, JSP, and Pojo beans. The same way here, IOC design pattern is applied or implemented with the help of IOC container, Spring IOC container. So obviously, IOC container is an algorithm or a logic that's been in the existence of the Spring framework. That's how we interpret them.
Thank you, sir.
Any other question? Any basic questions are also welcome, not a problem. So don't feel shy, because during query time it can be any queries, not an issue. If you have noted down any queries, please be utilizing this time. I don't mind responding for any basic questions also. I'm able to reiterate the same things again if in case you wanted somewhere, if you are not getting the concepts. So one thing that I expect is you be ready with your tools up and running on your missions and on your systems exclusively, so that we can be in sync as and when we go with more advanced topics that can help you to catch up things. Because when I teach, and if you imitate me, then obviously you get one level of practice, after which you go and do another round of practice, and then try to do some POCs. Probably I'll guide you to do some POCs as well, so you can carry that POC as a reference of this learning. So any questions, any other questions? Please, if you want to get some understanding, please let me know.
Sir, regarding the tools, I'm having everything set up, but except I'm using the older version of Java. Do I need to update that,
Which
or is it
version?
okay to
Which
1.8?
1.8, and which STS you are using?
1 second, sir.
Yeah, have you downloaded from the link which I shared?
Yeah, what Spring Toolsuite 4 only, I think 4.10.
So 4.10, then obviously I guess 1.8 might not be sufficient.
Okay.
So I guess you have to upgrade your JDK version. If you go for 3 somewhere, then probably you will have the option to use 1.8. But 4.10, I guess it's better to upgrade. Minimum Java 11, I guess.
Okay.
But are you able to launch the IDE?
Yes, I'm able to launch. Also, I have selected 1.8 only. It seems like I didn't run it, but it didn't have any error. Maybe I will try to run today, and also I will try to upgrade the version.
Okay, anyways, you just check, because on the fly I'm not sure if that would impact. But if it is launched, then I guess that would not be an issue. Anyways, we'll see.
Okay.
But ideally, the advice is you better have minimum of Java 11.
Okay.
Yeah. So do anyone have any other question? There is a question on. Okay. Yeah. Okay, there is. I guess the chat is not available. I could see some people have posted on WhatsApp. Okay, can we have session Saturday and Sunday morning 1:30 hour and evening 1:30? Looks like it's so long, unable to get together all inputs for session. Need some session discussed. No, obviously that's why you have a breathing space. Tomorrow evening only we are going to have the session, right? So the problem is we have participants from US also. I guess even from South Africa we have people. So to accompany them as well. This slot is the only slot that we have, so obviously we have to get used to this slot. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, great. But if it's only an Indian group, then probably we might not have a problem in the timings. But yeah, we have even onshore people. Okay. So any other question? So tomorrow we'll have more accessibility in the tool. So you'll have chat enabled. I guess so. I have to go and configure and see once again, and I'll test it. And also the Maven will be ready. So we'll be having the Maven way of developing the applications and forth. And one style of XML based configurations will be in detail seen, and then we'll move on with Java based configurations. And from there, we will be jumping forward to connecting with the backend and applying the web application implementations, and we'll be moving forward ahead. Okay. So I guess there is no more question. Hope we can wind up. Yeah. Someone is.
We will test now itself our teams, because extra 10 more minutes is there now. Could you please connect this 10 members again in the teams with chat?
For what?
Chat enabled.
Yeah, see, actually that's what I'm saying. I don't want to do that individually. We have a one set of settings which I can do.
Okay.
So that I don't need to do an individual invite. That settings deliberately I've given at the time of beginning. So I'm not sure if that can be changed. I have to connect up with the team's support team. I'll be in chat with them tonight, and then I'll enable that. So that's not a problem. We'll do that. Yeah. Any other question? Obviously, if you want to utilize this 10 minutes, I'm there available. If you have any questions, please go ahead. Teams part, not to worry, Joshua. I will take care. Your thought is correct. Yes, if it is an individual invite, also the problem is I have created as an organization account, the Microsoft. It's not just about the teams alone. I have everything bundled in it. So there I've given the settings wrongly. So that's the problem. Yeah. I guess you will also not have the sharing option of screen. Screen sharings are also not there for you people, I guess. So those feature also got disabled. Do you have hand raise? Hand raise is there?
Hand raiser and screen sharing also available, sir.
Okay. But this chat symbol is not visible.
Yeah, only problem is the chat symbol.
Yeah, only
the chat symbol is not visible, right? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, got it. Yeah. Okay. Okay, fine then. So if there are no questions, I guess we can wind up today. I'll try to see once the link is generated, the recordings link will be shared in the group. As of now, I haven't created the Telegram group. Okay, that will be done once I'm done with the offline recordings ready, so that the Telegrams will be used for sharing the offline recordings. Because in WhatsApp we cannot share huge size of video content, but in Telegram we can do so. Okay, so I'll be doing that, or else I'll be uploading in the OneDrive, and then I'll be sharing the link so that you can download it at your own pace. Either way, it's fine, but I'll try to see which one is flexible. But apart from that, if I wanted to share some huge resource size, then probably I'll be using Telegram. So anyways, the Telegram group will be created, regardless, irrespective of whether we are going to use it for offline sharing, offline recording sharing or not. Because I'll be sharing some reference books for Spring, which you can use it, and intermittent some additional resources will also be shared. Okay, so thank you so much. Have a great day and stay safe. Stay in and stay safe. We'll connect up tomorrow 5 o'clock.
Thank you,
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.